Hey guys, it's Ben here with Half Court Heave on YouTube. I'm here with my hosts Isaac and Arjun, and we're here today giving you another episode. This is episode 60. If you're watching right now and you have not liked or subscribed, that's a shame, and you should do that right now. So either rotate your phone up and press those buttons, or if you're on a computer, just X out of the full screen and press subscribe. Just do it. You want to get more of our content and we want you to see more of our content. That's why we put it out. If you're not following our Instagram, it's Half Court Heave YouTube on Instagram. We put out great content, and I put out my mock draft just the other day. If you wanted to see that, but without further ado, basically a Julius Randle themed episode. Now, there's a lot of Knicks stuff to talk about, and the first Knicks thing I do want to talk about today is Knicks versus Hawks. Right now, they're set up to be the 4 versus 5 matchup in the East. And if this did happen, if the season ended right now, they would play. Who do you have in a 7 game series, Arjun?
This is a very tough matchup because both teams are very evenly, they're very even teams. But I'm gonna have to say the Hawks on this one because I'm factoring in the way these teams have played in the season, and then I think Thibodeau is a terrific coach, but he's been playing Randle 38 minutes a game, and it doesn't matter how like ripped you are, how unless you're LeBron or like Michael Jordan, but that's going to catch up to him. He's going to get fatigued. That team is going to get fatigued. And most importantly, Randle, because that guy, we've seen during the season that he is the heart and soul of that team. When he doesn't play well, he rarely doesn't play well. He's been amazing this season. But when he doesn't play well, they really struggle. That team is really centered around him. I say the Hawks because in the playoffs, the guys who really step up are the veterans, the ones who are experienced, and they picked up a couple of veterans. That was maybe a questionable move for a team like them, but they picked up Lou Will, they picked up Gallo, and I just think that they're depth. They've had a lot of injuries over the season, and by the time the playoffs roll around, I think that they'll have all those players, and by that time, I think they'll come out on top.
I have to disagree with you. First, just before I talk about anything involving the Knicks versus Hawks matchup, you said they picked up a lot of veterans. So those are the guys who step up. Really, they have two veterans that are worthy of rotation minutes, and then that's Danilo Gallinari, who's like he's fine, like he's a good sixth man, and then you have Lou Williams. Lou Williams stunk. He stunk in the playoffs last year. He was terrible. So I don't think he's the prime example of playoff performer that you need in your locker room. But Knicks versus Hawks. I think I have to go with the Knicks in 5 or 6 here. I don't think it. Maybe it goes to 7. I think the Knicks got this one though, especially if they get home court advantage. They're not going to lose 4 games at MSG. They're not going to lose. They're going to win all 4 they have in MSG if needed. So I think really the main thing for me, I've looked into this a little bit, and I think you look at playoff performers, and you don't only look at players, but you look at coaches too, and how their teams perform in the playoffs. And you look at Nate McMillan. He's led the Pacers back into playoff territory in his years he was with the Pacers. Now he's with the Hawks. But when they got to the playoffs, everything about him died. Their offense was terrible. He's not a good playoff coach. He doesn't know how to he doesn't know how to make changes, and he doesn't know how to have an offense in the playoffs. I mean, every year it seems like the team's offense just completely collapses, and he hasn't won a playoff series, Nate McMillan, as a coach since the Supersonics existed, and it was with the Supersonics. In his 4 playoff appearances with the Pacers, he got swept he got swept 3 times and went to 7 with the Cavs in 2017-18. But back to the offense thing with Nate McMillan. In 2018, in the regular season to the playoffs is why I'm talking about the differential of points per game in the regular season to postseason. It goes -5 in there. 2018-2019, 16 points below their season average. And then in 2019-2020, in the bubble, it was 9 points below their season average. So he doesn't know how to direct an offense in the playoffs. He kills an offense. And if you were wondering why was he fired by the Pacers, it's exactly because he's not a good playoff coach. And then before I pass it on to Isaac,
Also,
I think that the Hawks, the Knicks have swept the Hawks this season. We know it's been 3 games, and it's been 3 games that have been dominated by the Knicks, except for this last one was a little closer. And it's because the Hawks don't have an answer for Julius Randle, and he also hasn't shown any signs of fatigue. And then the Knicks have an absolute answer for Trey. I mean, against the Knicks in the 3 games, he's averaging 24 and 12 with 4 turnovers, 36% shooting, and 21% from three. And the shooting splits are terrible. They know how to contain him. The assist numbers obviously go up, but he's still not great with the playmaking with
Also,
he gets.
also Ben, when you look at these two teams, like I want to talk about consistency because the New York Knicks have won 8 straight. I don't know, maybe the Hawks won their last game, but they're just not as consistent in the team. When you look at their whole team, but also when you look at their superstars, Trae Young is a less consistent player and has less impact on his team than Julius Randle does. And I think the Knicks also have a deeper team and a team that's more apt to win a playoff series. You have a ton of young guys that are stepping up, guys like RJ Barrett and Julius Randle, who's obviously, Emmanuel Quickly. All of these guys are giving into their team. Also, I'm not sure where Derrick Rose is at with his recent injury or if he's back, but if he can come back for the playoffs, that's another guy that can give you 20 points a game, a guy that can give that veteran experience. And I think you're right. Tibbs has been a good coach for them this year. And Arjun, you pointed to the fact of the minutes that he's playing Julius Randle, but he hasn't slowed down a single one of their games. They have the longest winning streak right now in the NBA, and I'm taking them in serious against the Hawks. I think they're deeper. Yeah. I think they're more apt to play in the playoffs. And I don't think Trae Young is a playoff player either.
Well, that's fair, but we also haven't seen
going back to what I was saying before. With the Hawks and the Knicks, like the Hawks having no answer for Randle and the Knicks having every answer for Trae. Julius Randle against the Hawks, I'm pretty sure this has been all over Instagram, is that Julius Randle is averaging 37, 12, and 7 on 60-50 splits against the Hawks this season over 3 games. So when it comes to stopping the other team and scheming against the other team's best player, I think Trae will also be easy to scheme around in the playoffs. You add in how these guys have played against the other's teams, and then you just see the collapsing of the Hawks in the playoffs compared to the Knicks.
Well, the thing is that I think you guys bring up very good points that it's true. Randle has gone crazy, and they can easily contain Trae, but we haven't seen what Trae is like in the playoffs. I don't think he's going to be anything special in the playoffs, but he's never gotten the chance to play in the playoffs. I think that when we talk about depth,
with his play style, it seems like he'll be easily containable by a coach, especially a defensive mastermind like Tibbs is this season, to contain this guy.
Okay, yeah. But if we're talking about overall depth, I think that the Hawks have that, like compared to the Knicks. I think they have more depth when they're fully healthy, because think about it. These players aren't anything special, but I mean, we're talking about, you have Cam Reddish deep in your rotation. You have Bogdanovich. Bogey has been coming up really clutch recently. He's been playing extremely well. I mean, he hasn't had the greatest season as like he's been like putting up 11 and like on inefficient shooting, but he's been playing very well.
Depth doesn't win championships. You notice when people go to the playoffs, they cut off more of their depth. And the Hawks aren't going to run a 10, 12-man rotation in the playoffs because you cut it down, you put more on your starters because there's less of a road ahead than there is in the regular season to save your players for. This is what they save the players for. It's actually more favored to a Tibbs system in the playoffs if his players aren't gassed, and they don't seem to be gassed at this point, for them to be still playing 40 minutes per game like they were in the regular season, maybe even now more.
That's the thing that when you provide you, like if someone's not playing well in the playoffs, they can easily be replaced. That's another thing that you can get from like depth, because if one of your starters in the Hawks, if Cam Reddish is absolutely bombing, he's not playing well at all, you have a guy behind him that you can put in there. You have backups on your team that you can rely on.
Since when is Cam Reddish not bombing a game? He's not good. I mean,
no, but that's just, you could bring that with any other player. The idea of having people to back you up, to be able to.
I mean, Trae Young's not replaceable. John Collins isn't replaceable on that team. The Hawks tried hard this offseason to replace John Collins, but you're not going to do that in the playoff time just like that because they're struggling. You can't do that. And I mean,
look, Ben, I disagree that depth is not. I disagree that depth is not important. I think depth is important in the playoffs. Maybe not as much as playing 8 guys, but if you have 7 or 8 reliable guys, that's very important. But turn to the Knicks. That's what they have. They're a perfect team with how they're set up, that they have all of their young guys know their role. They're all fitting in super well, and they're clicking at just the right time, right before we're going into the last stretch of games before the playoffs and the play-in set in. And the Hawks just haven't looked like that for me. I think
Well,
Bogdanovich is
Isaac, the Hawks have been on like they've been on a win streak recently too. So they haven't
I
been.
think Bogdanovich has been good for them, but in a series, I have to take the Knicks. I think they're clicking a lot well together. Like Ben said, they have a more reliable coach, especially in the playoffs. And head to head, I'm taking Julius Randle over Trae Young, especially in the playoffs, and especially with the guys that he's put around him and the way he's able to make an impact on their team.
The Hawks
They're
have
clicking at the right time. That's the most important
Hawks
thing.
have had no answer for Julius Randle, and we've rested our case. And the next thing we want to talk about is going on to the MVP conversation, still talking about Julius Randle. But the question is, who deserves more MVP votes, Julius Randle or Stephen Curry? I never thought I would be asking anybody this question. Go ahead, Isaac.
All right, give it to me. Give it to me. This is a ridiculous question. I'm sorry to say this. This is ridiculous. It is undoubtedly Steph Curry. You just heard me talk about and praise Julius Randle, but it is ridiculous to make this comparison. Stephen Curry has been on a historic tear recently. I mean, God even knows what the stats are. Something like in the last 10 games, he's had 10 plus 3-pointers in every single game. I mean, you're seeing his prolific scoring in his prime right now. It is undoubtedly Stephen Curry that will be getting the more MVP votes and that deserves the more MVP votes over Julius Randle. Julius has had a big impact on them. Don't blame me. Don't get me wrong. He's had a huge impact for the Knicks, but it is undoubtedly Stephen Curry. The stats show it. His game shows it. And even though the Warriors are at a lower position right now, he doesn't have as good a team. He is lifting up the Warriors on his back right now. He's the only reason that the Warriors are even slightly relevant in the league or in the West at all. He is undoubtedly the better MVP candidate than Julius Randle.
Okay. I agree that Curry is a very valuable player and he is in the running. His numbers would put him in the running for it. But if you're the 10th seed, I don't care which conference you're in. If you're the 10th seed in the NBA, you don't get a damn vote for the MVP. And I mean, that's from my standards, and that's from the voter standards, especially the voter standards, since 10 of the last 12 MVPs have been the number 1 seed, and the lowest MVP in the modern era, seeding-wise, has been the 6th seed Russell Westbrook, which was one of the greatest individual seasons in NBA history. So you look at the numbers. I mean, Julius Randle, 24, 11, and 6. On almost 50, 40, 90. He's putting up a great season. Then, of course, Stephen Curry, 31, 6, and 6, and like 50, 40, 90. Of course, Stephen Curry is doing his thing. But it comes down to these 3 things: the narrative, the team success, and the media domination. The narrative. Julius Randle, like any other great MVP, has a great narrative behind him. I mean, you have, like in the past, you look at Russell Westbrook after KD left him. You look at Giannis coming up from the 15th pick in the draft that nobody had ever heard of, and he comes up and he wins MVP. All these great narratives, and you look at this guy who was supposed to be traded because he was this bum who was overpaid, and all the fans wanted him out, and he worked hard, and he gets this Knicks team, that the New York Knicks, media dominating Knicks, to the 4th seed, and he's dominating. Nobody saw it. It's a great narrative. That's why they will vote for him. And then, I mean, Stephen Curry, you don't really hear about him much besides as of recently. And I think that goes into the voters' minds. And then you look at team success. Obviously, the Warriors are the 10 seed. They're, I think, a game under 500. And they were expected to be, before the season, a top 6 seed. You look at Randall's Knicks. They're the 4th seed, like 6 or 7 games over 500. And they were expected to be like a bottom 5 team in the NBA. You'll get team success and going over expectations. That's a huge thing in the MVP race and the MVP voting. So I think absolutely Randle will get more MVP votes than Steph. And I think he deserves it more than Steph because he's carrying a team that was supposed to be a 15 seed or a 14 seed to the 4th seed in the East with a comfortable lead over the .500 mark.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Those are great points. But this is about who do you think deserves it more. The voters are obviously going to favor a narrative. That's just how it's going to be. And Julius Randle has a narrative for himself, but Isaac said it himself. He is the first in scoring. He's putting up insane numbers. He's first in 3-pointers made, and he accounts for 30% of the Warriors' points. He is absolutely putting this team on their back. And you can bring up the fact that they're a low seed in their conference, but guess what? They're only 3 games behind the Knicks. The Knicks have 33.
No, but they're not in the playoffs right now.
That doesn't matter. It's about team
That's the
success.
problem. Yeah,
That's it. But
It's
no,
about-
that just does not matter. It's about team success, how you're playing. The conference. I couldn't give a damn about the conferences, honestly. You could take them away. You could pile up all the teams. They're only 3 wins behind the Knicks. And if you look at it, the Knicks have so much of a better roster. They have such a better team. They have the defense. They literally have no holes on their team. And this Warriors team is absolutely in shambles. They have so many holes on their team.
Holes on their roster? Have you their offense isn't anything special. Their offense,
but there's no glaring holes. It's a very balanced team. The point is that the Knicks have such a better team than the Warriors. The Warriors have a couple scores in that team.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter in the MVP race. If that mattered, the fact that their team has more holes in it, Russell Westbrook would be the MVP right now because of the numbers he's putting up. It's about where where all this stuff is happening. Russell Westbrook, if the seeding didn't matter, would be top 5 in the MVP race because of the crazy numbers he's putting up. But we don't see that because people just love Stephen Curry.
You said you talked about 2 things. You talked about a narrative, and you talked about the fact that you said everyone is talking about Randle, but no one's talking about Steph, which is just flat out not true. Everyone is talking about Steph right now. Second of all, if you want to talk about a narrative, we can talk about a narrative with Stephen Curry. Stephen Curry, what is he, like 33 right now? With an aging Warriors team with barely any help, putting up 30 plus a night for like 11 games in a row with 10 plus 3-pointers every single game. That is a narrative. If that's not a narrative, nothing is a narrative.
He put up 18 points against the Wizards. He had less points than Russell Westbrook had rebounds, and he lost to the Wizards with 18 points. That's a wrong stat. You
can point to one game. But overall, Stephen Curry has a way bigger case than Julius Randle does. Second of all, if you're talking about team success, you have to quantify that. You can't just say his team is more successful and then say, oh, we're going to forget about the holes in their team. If you talk about team success, you have to talk about who is he surrounded with. You're not going to give a guy an MVP.
It's not about
who's putting up the same numbers as someone when his team is way better.
Success and going above expectations. The Warriors dipped way below their expectations, and the Knicks went way over their expectations.
Yeah, because Klay Thompson was out.
You don't need context in team success when it comes to the MVP voting.
Of course you need context.
Okay, Russell Westbrook's the MVP then. Russell Westbrook is the league MVP. He's top 3.
Russell Westbrook is the MVP with no context.
So Stephen Curry is too. That's my whole point.
That's what I'm saying. You need to add context. When you add context, Stephen Curry is undoubtedly higher than Julius Randle because when you contextualize Russell Westbrook as a player, you can say the Wizards are way below. He also has Bradley Beal on his team. That's context. When you contextualize Stephen Curry, you can say who's around him, who's helping Curry score, who's helping him as a scorer on his team. Then, if you look at the Knicks, you can say, hey, Julius Randle. You can say, hey, Julius Randle has all these guys behind him that are helping him out. All right, that is context on his team. And to Arjun's point, the East is trash right now. Under the 3 seed, they're all like a couple games within each other. They're all like a couple games above or below 500.
There's still 7 games over 500. There's still 7 games over 500. That's the average 4 seed. It's not. This isn't the East that it was 2 weeks ago. They're soaring above 500 like the Pacers were last year. Was the East weak last year when it comes to seeding? No, it wasn't. It was just average. This year, it's getting to the point where the Hawks and the Knicks, they're both comfortably above 500. The seeding is getting more normal than it was 2 weeks ago when the Hornets were 2 games above 500 and they were the 4 seed. It's not the same thing. Team success is just team success. Where they're ranking and where they're seeding in their respective conferences is what the MVP is like half based off of. That's why Steve Nash won the MVP when he was putting up like 16, 8 and 10 or something. Or 16, 6 and 10. I think it was something more like that. There's a reason team success with no context is still a big part of the award. Sure, if Curry's team was winning, he would be absolutely the number 1 in the MVP race right now, but they're not. nothing else matters. It's not who's he passing to. It's just that he's not winning, and that's what the MVP award is. Half of it is winning basketball games, even arguably more than that, or more than half of the award is winning basketball games. That's what it's decided off of, and that's why Julius Randle is going to get more votes than Stephen Curry will.
All right.
Isaac. The next thing I want to talk about is Nikola Jokic. I just left him out of my power rankings, and Isaac got mad, but he's putting up historically some of the best offensive numbers by a center in NBA history. And my question that I will ask myself and answer myself first is Jokic the MVP so far in the season? And honestly, before Embiid's injury, I had to give it to Embiid. I think he was like undisputed to me, the MVP. But honestly, right now, he's giving me something to think about. And I think right now I'm leaning towards Jokic being the league MVP right now because he's been so offensively dominant so that it kind of cancels out his worse than mediocre defense. Like he is bad defense for a big, and that's a big thing for a big man in the NBA is if you're a bad defender, that's almost half the game to you. But I mean, offense wins championships. Offense is the NBA today, and he's putting up numbers that offensively no center has ever done. He's a top playmaker in the NBA when you look at his assist numbers. And he's almost 60, 40, 90. That's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. His offensive numbers are out of the ballpark, and I think that cancels out his defense for me. If you want to say Embiid, that's fine. If you want to say Giannis even, that's fine. But I think right now I got to lean towards the edge of Jokic because of how dominant he's been on offense this season.
Absolutely. I'm good. Actually, yeah, go ahead, Isaac. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm gonna take Embiid. Right now, the Sixers are half a game away. They just got him back from his stretch of injury. They are half a game away from the 1 seed in the East, which is really impressive from them because they've struggled. Talk about chemistry. They've struggled to have chemistry between those two guys, him and Ben Simmons in the past. And right now, it seems to be really clicking for them with Doc Rivers as their head coach. Embiid has been putting up really incredible numbers. You can talk about Jokic's numbers. Embiid is putting up 30, 11, and 3 right now. And you want to talk about the defense? MVP is a complete award. There is Defensive Player of the Year, which, by the way, Embiid is in the running for. He said himself the other day, and I totally agree, he's in that conversation. He's top 5 for DPOY right now, which is a big deal. MVP is most valuable player. It's not the best offensive player in the league. It's that whole package. With Embiid, you have incredible defense on the inside, which has been one of the reasons the Sixers have been so good this year. And on the offensive side, he's given you 30 a night. He's given you 11 rebounds and 3 assists. I think I just have him above them right now. And the Nuggets are just a lower team. We already talked about this with Randle and Steph. Ben said it's almost more than half of the time you have to look at team impact, and they're half a game out of the 1 seed right now. I think the Nuggets are right now. It looks like the Nuggets are at like something like, I don't know, like 4 seed in the West or something. So somewhere around there. The Sixers are almost at the top of the East, and Embiid's coming off of that injury. When you look at the numbers he's putting up on both sides, and on the offensive side, and you look at his defensive impact, the fact that he's putting up 30 and 11 and 3 assists, and you're also talking about him as Defensive Player of the Year on almost the top seed in the East. I think he's my MVP favorite over Jokic right now.
I think.
Wait, Ben. Let me go first, but I think that I'll be with Ben on this one. I think that Jokic is the MVP for me because he's putting up 26, 11, and 9. I mean, he's at a near triple double level. I don't really have to bring up any more stats to show how dominant he is because you could bring up defense like all the time. Defense is half the game, and it's a lot more important for a guard to have for a center to have defense than a guard. But his offense is so dominant. His offensive game, that is what the NBA is. The NBA is he's evolving. He fits that the description of like an evolving center. He's evolving with the game. But if you look at the Nuggets, they just lost Jamal Murray to an ACL injury. And yes, they're the 4th seed, but they're also a game behind. They're also like this close. They're a game behind the 76ers record. So they're right there. They're at the same level in terms of record-wise. In context, it's very important.
Hey, let's stay consistent though, Ben, because we just said with Julius and Steph that, hey, The Warriors are a little bit behind, but they're in the 10th spot, and the Knicks are at the 4.
You said that they're the 2, and then, or you said that the Knicks are the 4, and the Warriors are the 10. But there's no, okay. But I wasn't talking about that. Arjun was talking about that. I just gotta say, I think it's like a flip of a coin. But what flips the coin to the Jokic side for me is the fact that he hasn't missed a game today. Let's talk about consistency. Let's talk about a guy who showed up every game and played every single game this season. I think that's really important to the MVP race. And I mean, it gets to the point where like they have home court advantage seating wise. That's all. Once you get to that point in the standings, you're in the MVP race. You can be in the MVP race. I don't think below that you could be unless you're putting up like record breaking numbers. But yeah, I mean, Jokic is doing what no center has ever been able to offensively. And I think that cancels out his defense. I think what you said about Embiid is completely viable. I think it's a great point. Is that defense? I would say is more about like 35% of the game than 50% of the game. It's decreasing by the year, but he's still. Yeah, I mean, he's like a defensive player of the year, top 10 candidate this season. He's been a great defensive player of the year, or a great defensive player this year. You saw what he did to Drew Holiday, that one play that's going viral on Twitter. But I think. You could pick either side. I wouldn't be mad. You could pick a couple of guys, and I wouldn't be mad. But with how dominant that Jokic has been on the offensive side, I think I have to go with him.
Absolutely. I think that my last point is that they've, over this year, like, people don't recognize the impact that a lot of those Nuggets bench players had, like Jeremy Grant, Torrey Craig. They had a pretty big impact on that Nuggets team. The Nuggets have been they've been consistently good for the last couple of years. And the fact that they're like, they have a really good record. They're playing very well right now. The West is just extremely deep. The fact that they're playing that well, and they've been on a 4-game winning streak, like disregarding last night's game against the Warriors, they've been on a winning streak ever since Murray tore his ACL. So I think if the Nuggets could continue to play at a level where they're winning a lot more games than losing, I think Jokic is most definitely the MVP.
Yeah. Also, when you just to close it off, like when you talk about the narrative that Ben brought up before, which I think is important, both of these guys have like a kind of story. You know, when you talk about Jamal Murray went out for the Nuggets and he's able to hold down the ship for them, but Embiid, a player who their team in the past has had a lot of, criticism from the media, and in the playoffs, it's just shown that they haven't been able to play together. And now he's coming in and giving you these incredible numbers and leading you to, half a game out of the 1 seed in the East. Even though he has been injured, that's another thing. Even and being in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation, that's a big narrative for Embiid for MVP. But I just want to transition us to the next topic, which I will send over to Arjun, which is: are the Lakers still favorites in the Western Conference?
I'm going to keep this brief, but I think that they're still the favorites because, I mean, they just got AD back. They've been somewhat like surviving without LeBron and AD for a while. And I think that when you get LeBron back, he's going to be fully rested. This time is giving him, that's a lot of times, like LeBron in his past years, that's what he hasn't had. He hasn't had the time during his Cleveland days, he's always been playing. He's been going through the regular season. He's had to like carry that team. And this injury, I don't want to say it's a good thing, but like, in a way, it gives him time to rest and prepare for the playoffs. And when you have a rested LeBron, AD's gotten time to rest. This team is still the favorites for me.
This is going to be LeBron's hardest path to a championship, to the finals. Like, not to winning a championship, but to winning a finals. He's always been in the East, and he's always had, like, the thing in the Jordan-LeBron debate has been Jordan faced harder competition getting to the finals, and LeBron faced harder competition in the finals than Jordan. And that's always been the thing talked about. But, I mean, this year, if they stay at this pace, they'll play the Nuggets in the first round, and maybe they'll fall. I don't see them falling below the Mavericks, though. That's a pretty decent gap there. I think they stay at the 4 or 5. I don't see them getting above a top 3 team. They're too far behind at this point. So if the Lakers play the Nuggets in the first round, I got them against the Nuggets with no Murray, obviously. But then after that, you go ahead and you face either the Jazz or the Suns, whoever is the 1 seed in that scenario. And then if you beat one of those teams, which I think the Suns would be the harder matchup, then you play the Clippers, and I think I would have them going to the Western Conference Finals. but I'm going to say Clippers in 6 or 7. And I know that's kind of been canceled out. That was like a popular opinion last year before the bubble. And then it just as soon as the Clippers lost to the Nuggets in that embarrassing fashion, no one ever said Clippers in 6 or 7 again. That never happened. And I still think it's a valuable case. We haven't seen them in a 7-game series against each other. And I do think this year Paul George will be actually playing like he's supposed to in the playoffs. And I mean, their team got better. Their team is playing better this season, and they keep on getting better as the season goes on. I think once they get fully healthy, and if they do meet the Lakers, that's the big question. If they do actually meet the Lakers in the Western Conference Finals, then I would have them beating the Lakers. But the question is, can they make it there, and can Paul George show up when it's time to show up? But I don't think they're favorites. My favorites are the Clippers. Of course, the national favorites are probably still the Lakers because LeBron and AD, but with this much time not playing together, it's not like LeBron's resting. LeBron has an ankle injury he's rehabbing. Like, he's not just resting up and getting his body ready. He's rehabbing an ankle injury, and he's still not back, which is scary, but he'll be back, and then they won't really have any time to recalibrate because there's only so many games left in the regular season, and then there's just like a couple playing games, and then boom, you're in the playoffs. So I think if they do make it to the Western Conference Finals, which is something to think about, will they make it there? Then I think I have the Clippers beating them, so they are my favorites.
Yeah, look, I'm still gonna rock with the Lakers because I'm not gonna count out Bron. I think they've sort of held down the ship with his absence, with the AD's absence. AD is gonna get back into form, but Ben is completely right. The Clippers are looking way better than they were last year. There were a lot of telltale signs that the Clippers weren't going to click in the playoffs because of how they played in the regular season. It seemed like they were too nonchalant about resting both of those guys and thinking that they would just click in the end. But they have played really well together. I think that they've done a very good job together. And look, it's not just them. The Jazz, the Suns, all of these teams can take out the Lakers in a 7-game series. I'm still rocking with them, though, because I think Schroeder has been a big piece for them. And, Drummond has also been good for them. I'm not going to say great, but it was a good pickup for them. Those guys have stepped up. And I think they all know their roles. I've heard someone say this before. Caruso, Schroeder, KCP, Drummond, they all know their roles. When they're coming back, they're not going to be pissed that AD and LeBron are starting to, take away their minutes. They're looking ahead to that back-to-back title. And I think they're going to click in the playoffs. The West is deep. I agree with Ben. This is going to be the hardest path for LeBron to get to the finals. I'm still going with them, though. It's going to be a concern that they haven't all played together. I mean, has LeBron played with Drummond a single game? I don't think he has. He was injured before they even got to play together. I'm still going there because LeBron is that guy that can bring a team together, but it's going to be his hardest run of his career.
All right, yeah, no, I agree with you. And I'm just going to close this off here. Drummond is actually something to keep an eye on because, I mean, he's a historically known ball hog, and he's not especially good at being a ball hog on the offensive end. He's a terrible offensive center, probably a bottom 5 offensive center in the league. His rebounding and a little bit of defense makes up for that. But Bismack Biyombo still put up a double-double on him. That's ridiculous. So I think seeing how he will react to somebody taking his shots away will be interesting because still, until AD and LeBron are back, he would have never played on a good team in his life. But the next thing I want to talk about is your Boston Celtics. Right now, they've been heating up. The Heat, not so much. But I have a strange question for you, and that is, who is more likely to make a deep playoff run, the Celtics or the Heat, Isaac?
I'm going to switch it up here. Originally I was going to roll with the Heat because I think that they are a more apt team to make a deeper run in the playoffs. I'm going with the Celtics though, because I think Kemba has clicked late in the season. We saw this in the last game against the Suns. Tatum went 3 for 11 or something like that, 3 for 10. Jaylen Brown is out. You're going against the Suns, who are, to my knowledge, fully healthy. And Kemba steps up and the Celtics have a big win. He has clicked with them recently. A lot of their bench guys have stepped up. It's been the big concern for the Celtics is that they don't have enough bench players. Can Marcus Smart lead those guys to, help their bench out? I'm going with the Celtics, though. I think they are more of a threat in the East. They have more guys that can put up 30 on you than the Heat do. And I think the Heat were great last year. Obviously, they were a sleeper. No one really saw them going as far as they did. I'm going with the Celtics because I think Kemba has clicked recently in a way that once they have Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum and those three guys playing all together, that Brad Stevens can slug it out against a really good Eastern Conference team and win. I could see them winning a 7-game series against the Bucks or even against the Sixers. I think that's really plausible that they can get there. Maybe not against the Nets, but I still think that they have the firepower to do it. The Heat have a more complete team, but seeing Kemba click with them, I have more faith in them to be able to throw some games on the board against a really good Eastern Conference team.
So I agree with you that I would say in just a situation where like it's like these teams in a neutral site, which team is more likely to make a playoff run? I would say it's the Celtics. I don't see either of these teams making it farther than the first round, though. I mean, like I could see the Celtics maybe beating the Bucks, but the Bucks are kind of designed to the specialty of beating the Celtics right now. I mean, the Celtics have terrible power forward play, and I mean, we all know who plays power forward for the Bucks. And then, I mean, Drew Holiday guarding Kemba is a completely different story than Kemba guarding Drew Holiday. I mean, it's Drew Holiday is going to hold him under 15 basically every night, if not less than 15. And then Drew Holiday is probably going for 20 plus every single game on Kemba Walker. And then Peyton Pritchard off the bench. That's a terrible defensive point guard rotation. But I do think Celtics are more apt for a playoff run because last year, the Celtics and the Heat, they faced in the playoffs. And then the Heat, they beat the Celtics in what, 6 or 7? You guys are Celtics fans, answer me.
They beat him in 6.
Yeah, you need 6 games, and that was when Hero was playing like a superstar. And now you got Tyler Hero, you're worried about his celebrity status, and he's off making cereal boxes and wearing shirts with his name on it instead of being good at basketball. He's not even a top 5 rookie in his class anymore. He's not good. He's average. He's really not that good. He's not going to step up in the playoffs. He's not the player they wanted him to be. They could have had so many great guys. Victor Oladipo may play in the playoffs because his knees are always broken. And then Jimmy Butler, how much can a guy do? I mean, he and Bam Adebayo are going to have to average upwards of 25 points per game and still play great defense to win a playoff series against the Sixers. I mean, Joel Embiid, Bam can be as great of a defender as he wants. Joel Embiid's going to do his thing on him. And then, I mean, Tobias Harris, the Sixers just have a great team once again. But I think I got to go with the Celtics here. I think they are in a better situation since they're playing the Bucks instead of the Sixers if the season ended today. And I just think that the Celtics are a better team right now than they were compared to the Heat right now.
That's you guys bring up very fair points, and I think it's close. But I'm honestly going to put the Heat here because of the way, because it took 7 games last year for the Celtics to beat a struggling Raptors team. Struggling isn't even the word for how they played. They were god awful. And I think that they have 8 right now. They have 8 guys over 10 points per game. They've got a lot of depth. They've got a lot of scoring depth. And that's how they won so many games in the playoffs last year. They had so many guys that could hit you at so many different, they had so many different angles that they could beat you. They could beat you. They could beat you with Duncan Robinson absolutely torching you.
They had 3 stars last year. Now they have 2.
I mean, Oladipo could come back.
He's not a star though. Oladipo's not a star.
He's not a star, but he could make a huge impact for them. He's a great defensive player, and he could definitely.
He's a pretty good defensive player. He's not a great defensive player, and he's falling off a cliff. He would be a game changer if he came back, but not enough to beat the Sixers. The Sixers are too well-rounded to lose to this Heat team, and honestly, too well-rounded to win in any more than 6 games. But
I mean, you know how bad Jimmy would want to go to, to beat the Sixers in a 7-game series after they took Tobias Harris over him.
It doesn't matter how bad he wants it because they don't have an answer for Embiid. I mean, Bam is of the best answers for Embiid, and he's still not an answer for Embiid.
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't think any team has an answer for him. No team really hasn't. Yeah. Gobert couldn't stop him. Gobert let him get 40 and 20. There's no answer for Embiid. Yeah,
there's literally absolutely no answer for Embiid. And then, I mean, they have great depth, great shooting. I mean, Danny Green has been phenomenal this year. Seth Curry, Dwight Howard off the bench. Matisse Thybulle clamping up anybody who wants to. Hero's not going for 10 plus on or more than 10 points per game on Matisse Thybulle. I'm just saying it right now. But the next
Yeah.
thing I want to talk about is the flaming hot Washington Wizards. Again, not something I expected I would be saying 2 or 3 weeks ago. And this is, can the Wizards make a run in the playoffs if they win the play-in tournament? Isaac.
This is super easy for me. I already talked about this earlier today. Yes, the answer is undoubtedly yes. And the more to the point that if you're in, if they get to the 8th seed and you're talking about the Sixers facing them in the first round, they are not going to be happy to face Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal in the first round. They're not going to be happy. If they can get to that play-in, they're going to win the play-in and they can make a run in the playoffs. They can beat a team like, I'm going to say it, they can beat the Nets. They've beaten the Nets multiple times this year when they've been fully healthy. Russell Westbrook has been playing incredibly well this year. Bradley Beal has also been playing very well this year. Those guys haven't been consistent, but they can make a run if they get to the play-in. And we've already seen them beat the Nets multiple times this year. We've seen them beat very good teams. They can do that. They have the star power. They're very top heavy. They have the 1-2 punch that they would need to take down one of these big teams. They can make a playoff run. I could see them getting to the second round from the bottom of the play-in.
Okay, I think that I'll classify a playoff run as winning a playoff series. I think it's definitely possible. I think the Nets are, if they're begging that only the Pacers that the Pacers would win the play-in tournament to be the 8th seed, because the rest of the options are the Heat, who went to the finals last season. You don't want to face them. Bam Adebayo perfectly fits the weaknesses of your team. He would put up a good stat line on you guys. And then you look at the Wizards. Russell Westbrook, obviously, we've seen what he's done. He's been on a tear whenever he plays the Nets, and he's just been on a tear this season. And if you don't have James Harden, you're basically just the Nets before the Harden trade, minus LeVert and minus Jared Allen, and then also minus Spencer Dinwiddie, unless he comes back from injury. So, the Wizards could go to 7 games and maybe even win that series potentially. They're clicking at the right time. And then, the Hornets, if they're fully healthy, playing against a team that's the Nets without Harden, Jared Allen, or Karis LeVert, then obviously I think that's not a team they want to face either. We saw when they had Jared Allen, Karis LeVert, the Hornets, even before they started playing LaMelo Ball and before he started playing like a star, they beat up on them. So I think the Nets are holding on for dear life, hoping that the Pacers will win the play-in tournament. And I would say the Wizards could absolutely win in a 7-game series against a Hardenless Nets. I think if they have James Harden, they're absolutely not going to more than 5 games with anybody in the first round. But I think that, yeah, absolutely. Russell Westbrook's been playing at his 2016 level this season, especially as of recently. He's been on an absolute tear getting this team back into the play-in tournament. They were like 11 or 12 games under 500 before, and now they're in the play-in tournament. So I think, yeah, they could absolutely bring the Nets to a 7-game series, maybe even win.
Yeah, I think that we're all in agreement, but the thing is that in order to make the playoffs, you need to beat out the Hornets, and the Hornets the Hornets are getting LaMelo Ball back.
The way it's formatted, they would play the Pacers, and they would have to win 2 games against the Pacers before the Pacers win 1. And then if they win, they go and they play the loser of Hornets versus Heat, and then the loser of that game, fully healthy, then the Wizards have to beat them 2 games before the other wins 1, and then they have to make the playoffs, and that's what's difficult there.
Yeah, I think that. Well, first of all, I don't think they're going to lose that spot they're at right now because they do have currently ranked. They have a 28th easiest schedule right now, going from now on to the end of the season. But also the Bulls are just struggling right now. They've lost 4 in a row. Zach LaVine's got COVID, so I don't think they're going to be a problem. They're going to be right now where they're at. They're not going to fall. They're only going to go up. So that always begs the possibility they could definitely go above. They could definitely, in terms of seeding wise, just take out the tournament in terms of seeding, making the 8th seed. I don't think they're going to surpass the Hornets in terms of seeding, but they could definitely go get ahead of the Pacers. So I think it's definitely a possibility of them winning the play-in tournament.
Yeah, but if they're a 9 or a 10 seed, then they still have to face then they still have to face the 9 or the 10 seed and then win that series and then go against the 7 or the 8 seed and the loser of that game and then win that series. And then they have to play in the playoffs. That's the disadvantage it puts you at. That unless you're a 7 or 8 seed, you win your first game and you go to the playoffs automatically. You're getting way less rest than the 1 seed actually is because you're playing in a play-in tournament. They're sitting on the couch watching you play the play-in tournament while they're getting their bodies ready. And I think that's a big struggle for them. I would obviously still bet on the Nets to beat the Wizards in a playoff series, just like I would against the Hornets or the Heat or the Pacers. But generally, I think that's all we have for that topic. And the last thing we want to talk about today is the Nets. And can the Nets make it out of the East without James Harden? He's going to come back by playoff time, potentially. But if he doesn't, if something happens and he does not come back for playoff time, can they make it out of the East without him? Arjun?
I don't think so. We talked about this earlier about KD and Harden, who's more valuable, and I'm wrong. I was wrong. Looking back from what I argued it for KD, I think that Harden is the most valuable player to this team. I mean, he really brought this team together when they were struggling, and it's so impressive how he adapted to the situation. We assumed that he was going to be like a ball hog. He wanted to get the spotlight, but no, he did not. He went down. He took the leap, stepped down to like 24 points per game, and he got a lot more assists. But I mean, I don't think that without him, he's connecting them with the playmaking. Without that playmaking, it's going to be so much harder to beat the Sixers. The Sixers is a team. They're the team that I'm looking at that could definitely. They have a much better chance of beating them if Harden just does not come back. I mean, they're 4-4 the last few games. They really haven't been good recently, and I think that if that continues, it's going to be a real concern for them.
Yeah, I think that I don't see. There's definitely a chance, obviously, with two superstars on your team like that. You know, I mean, Blake Griffin's been a good addition for them. Obviously, they could. I'm not canceling out the possibility. I'm saying I wouldn't bet any money on them leaving the East if they didn't have James Harden. I think I rested my case last episode, and I'll rest it again here. James Harden is the most valuable player to the Nets because the ideal was, like you said, that it was going to be there's only one ball attitude. Instead, there's only 4 other guys to pass to. I can only pass so many times. He's been a great playmaker for them. He's overtaken the point guard name from Kyrie Irving, which is a ridiculous task. If Kyrie Irving calls you his point guard when he was the point guard the entire season, you know you're good at your job. But generally, without James Harden, they lose so much, and they don't have Karis LeVert. They don't have Jared Allen. They traded away for him. So it's really, I think if they had Harden and Kyrie, it would be a better chance than if they had KD and Harden for the entire playoffs. It would be an even better chance. But with no Harden, I don't really see them escaping over the Bucks or the Sixers or maybe even like the Knicks. I think I would still have the Knicks over them in a playoff series.
I mean, I'm not going to go that far, but I think you're right. He's super valuable to their team. He actually meshed really well with KD and Kyrie when he was healthy. I mean, if you go head to head, Sixers can probably take them out without Harden. And with Harden, it's undoubtedly, I think that they're going to escape the East and they will go to the finals. But I think without him, you look at Sixers or the Bucks, maybe another team in there, like you said, the Knicks, maybe someone else who can escape the play-in round or something like that. They can take them out, or they can take them to 7 games because he's the guy that pushes them over the edge of, oh, we're dominating you in a series, where you step back without Harden and you're like, hey, the other team actually can really compete against us here. But when you have Harden on the court, you have probably 4 guys that can give you a ton of points, that can score on you, depending on, if you have Blake Griffin or Joe Harris or something like that on the floor. You have like 4 different guys at any time on the court who can give it to you. Without him, it's a little more limited because with James Harden, as Ben said, he's adapted to that role. He's been able to play with them. He's been a lot more pass first, especially than he was in Houston. And then a lot of people thought he would be. That big 3 is unstoppable. But without them, you're looking at the Sixers or to be able to, put up 7 games on them and probably beat them and get to the finals. So they really need him to mesh together their team and to make it out of the East.
I think his impact on an NBA team was not realized as big as it is until KD went down and Harden and Kyrie were sitting there. We were like, okay, they're gonna tank. They're gonna tank far down in the standings from what they would be with all three of these guys, and they stayed. They went up without KD, and that's when James Harden's value was really like put into people's minds as, hey, I'm that guy. I'm that level of guy. I'm an MVP level guy on any team you put me on. I can play this role. I can play this role. I can do anything you want from me. I can even now contribute on defense at a good level that you need me to. He does it all for any team that you put him on. He elevates that team, and I think that not having him will be big for them. But that'll be it for us today. If you're still watching, you should go ahead and like and subscribe if you haven't already. Follow our Instagram, Half Court Heave YouTube, and that'll be it for us today. See you guys later.